12/11/19, flashlight operation and maintenance, thoughts about the process of writing, an email with a friend. This segment is best read after reading my previous segment, The Right People. And that can be found it can be found on my blog at richardstephenthomas.wordpress.com. It can be found on my Facebook page. It can be found on my LinkedIn page. It can be found on my Twitter feed. It can be found on Medium. And I will put a link onto the YouTube page as well. On Wednesday, December 11th, 2019, at 8:29 a.m., Robert McCaskill wrote, enjoying your segments, was reminded that not only did Walt Whitman self-publish, he wrote his own reviews, gave himself raves, deserved, of course. I keep copies of Leaves of Grass by the toilet, open wherever you like and read a page. Helps to let go of one's shit. You know, I would say this too, that Rob has sent me a subsequent email where he was discussing a story about Joan Rivers, that she had a relationship with her therapist, and when she left that relationship, she broke out and had a big performance that led to her career. That therapist used to like to say, look at, he'd ask his patients, clients, whatever, he would ask them, what movies did you see this week? He said, because movies are like dreams. And the clients would often say, well, look, it's a dream. It's not my dream, it's somebody else's dream. They said, but if you look at it, it becomes your dream too. It becomes your own in terms of the way that you interpret it, the interpretation of dreams. And that steps to a part of my writing process, which I'm going to say parenthetically right here before I get back to Rob's email. So like before I had my breakdown, which I had at age 34, and I'm 64 now. In the couple years leading up to it, actually all my life at one time or another, I kept journals. I would fill out all these spiral notebooks. And I had all this writing. And I remember I was so distraught at that time that I put them all in garbage bags and I threw them away, which was no great loss in terms of the writing because I was very confused and writing or nothing was going to help me. There were a lot of other things that I had to do really before I could effectively write. But my process is basically that I start with a journal entry. In my mind, it's personal, but then I expand it out to the universal. And that's how I come out with writing, because I think all writing's autobiographical, and I think that basically, if it's true for me, it's true for humankind, because I'm a carbon-based life form. I mean, I'm not any different than anybody else in that regard, and that's really the basic start of it. So it's interesting, as Rob pointed out to me, that Mrs. Maisel, which I wrote about recently, that very nice series, Mrs. Maisel was based on Joan Rivers' emergence as a comedian, in part anyway. That's actually where it happened. Well, when I wrote about Mrs. Maisel, the title of my segment on Mrs. Maisel is that the unfairly maligned Mrs. Maisel. And I wrote about that show because the show had been criticized in a way that I viewed as being unfair. But really what I was writing about on the personal level was my own dealing with unfair criticism. So everything that I write is about me, but it's also about you. I, I also want to say something else. I've been told, said, well, people tell me, oh, I love the way that you write about art, or I love the way that you write about writing. I actually just write about what's in front of me. A couple of years ago, I was writing a lot about Trump. Then I saw the rise of this autocrat. And like a lot of other people, I saw it early. But really, what I was writing about is I had dealt with a lot of right wing lawyers, and I had been exposed uh, to this fanatical right wing church. I wasn't a member of it, but through family members, uh, I was around these people, and I was processing that. So I just write what's in front of me, and what's in front of me is always determined by what I'm dealing with, and the external world always or often provides a point of contemplation from which I can get it. Objective is the wrong word, but I can get some sort of broader understanding of the thing that I'm dealing with. And I really believe that's a big process of my art. Now, I am not beyond talking directly about my own life. If I think I can talk directly about my own life in a way that I can figure something out about what I'm feeling in that life, and also get it to some universal that can be useful to other people, that's what I do. And that's what that previous segment, The Right People, was about. So this is the process. I mean, people say writing is rewriting. Yes, that's involved. And normally when people talk about the process of writing, not normally, I know, but but you see a lot of technical and technique things. I think the hardest part of it, the hardest and most challenging and most official part of it, but it's actually in the my writing style. So, when Rob says here, open wherever you like and read a page helps to let go of one's shit. Yes, that's a big part of it. I think you let go of one shit, and you embrace what sustains. That's a now. Let me get back to Rob here. He said James Baldwin said the act of writing is, quote, finding out what you don't want to know, what you don't want to find out, end of quotes. He was so brave. And I would say, uh, I want to find out, so uh, um, for me, the this is the positive side of this kind of hypersensitivity that I have. This real pain that I feel often in relation to the world, and this real joy that I find that in the process of understanding, uh, you get release. You start, and you get discernment. You say, oh well, this is something that I view as good, and this is something that I view as bad. It's that the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi. Said, don't get angry, but whatever. I can't remember. It's like, but don't don't go into don't go into negative emotion. Don't go to aggression. Don't go into power conflicts, but understand. And I think, to me, the art of writing is very important to that, because the the understanding has to happen on a personal experiential plane. And all any writer can do is like be a resonant confirming voice to what the reader is going through. A reader is going to respond to writing that they're going through. My personal experience as a human being is not superior to any other person. Uh, but the but any art writer, I really believe it's an elite experience. I don't think everyone can do it. I've written and talked about that before. I don't think everyone can do it. I mean, it's the only thing that I can do. I can experience life and then I can communicate about it. And not everyone has that ability, but everyone has the ability to appreciate it. And it's the same thing ultimately on the human level in terms of the application to one's life. So that's it. This is very succinctly, Rob is touching on really, really uh, essential aspects of writing, the process of writing. So James Baldwin said that the act of writing is finding out what you don't want to know when you don't want to find out. He was so brave. Did you see I Am Not Your Negro? Thrilling. And again, this whole idea of courage, I mean, it's our lives. To me, it's like a necessity in order to reflect upon life, to live it to its fullest potential. So I actually think, it's like to be or not to be. I mean, the courage is to live, and to live. Uh, I I guess there are other ways to do it, but I haven't found anything like art. A limitation of therapy is that in therapy you're limited to your own situation, and I think it's important to see oneself in the context of humanity. I think psychological questions are ultimately existential questions. And I don't think that we come to our existential determinations through abstraction. We come through it through the concrete story of our lives. And that's something that thrills me about writing. Okay, Rob continues. But writing for me is also about remembering what I've forgotten. That my life is a wonder, a marvel, a fabulous collaboration between me and unknown forces. Yeah, isn't that beautiful? I mean, Rob's comment here, that's really a beautiful statement. It said, but writing for me is also about remembering what I've forgotten. That my life is a wonder, a marvel, a fabulous collaboration between me and unknown forces. It's an improv game of fill in the blank. For those of you who aren't familiar with improvisation, there's a game where you do a scene and then you extend your hand to the audience and ask for a suggestion of what word or action or whatever to put into the scene from the audience as the scene is progressing. The great writer and I are hilarious, poignant. Yeah, and that says about that tells me a lot about Rob's personal attitude towards his work. That idea of finding the humor and the pathos is something which is, by the way, what all the great comedians or comic actors have, that pathos. I mean, Charlie Chaplin is is a tremendous is a great example of that. Rob continues. I like it that Hemingway used to ask bullfighters, how's the writing going? Meaning life in the ring. He saw Veronica's as sentences. A sequence of turns makes a paragraph. And conversely, what we do is bullfighting, Rob asks. How close can you come to the horns? I like that you're looking for the right person, people. I think they'll find you. And what Rob's getting here again is what I was referring to a little bit earlier. There's an intimate connection to the point of a complete congruence between writing and life. The writing is the life. The life is the writing. I remember that Bill Clinton used to say about his mother, who I believe was a nurse. I don't remember. I think she was a nurse. He said that she read life like a novel. So, in other words, she saw beyond the surface, beyond what conformity tells us, beyond, quote, common sense, one of the most ridiculous phrases in the English language, common sense, this unreality that people buy into in order to avoid life, which, I mean, this talk of courage, to live is to be brave, to be or not to be. That's the choice. Okay. And here is my response. On Wednesday, December 11, 2019, 11:16 a.m., Richard Thomas wrote, Rob, you are a mensch. Love Whitman. Love your insights regarding letting go and remembering through reading and writing. I'd gladly partner with a publisher if he or she replicated my self-publishing, where I handle all of my edits and I don't have to sell or kiss the publisher's ass. And that echoes back to that piece, The Right People. I saw I Am Not Your Negro on that LA trip we talked about. Rob and I had talked about a trip to LA where I wrote what I thought was one of the pieces of what I call real writing, one of the first ones in this whole process of writing on this blog, which by the way is thrilling, because what I would say to anybody who wants to write, you can take writing classes and workshops and all the rest of it. And that's fine, I guess. But the biggest process of writing is just to write. I mean, people will tell you their impressions about your writing, and they'll have insightful things, and you should be open and you should listen to them. But ultimately, the way you write, your voice is found by using it. Now, I've been doing this since 2011. The blog itself started in 2014, but I started seriously approaching this phase of my life as a writer. I've been doing it for going on 9 years now, and by my lights, and at the end of the day, they're the only lights that matter. By my lights, the writing gets better and better. And it's not because I'm some genius or anything. It's like, it's like anything else. If you like playing basketball, play a lot of basketball. You're going to become a better basketball player. Just go out there and keep playing basketball. So anyway, I saw I Am Not Your Negro on that LA trip we talked about. I saw it in this little bookstore, and they threw me out after the movie because I got into an argument with a Republican lady during the group discussion. It was before everyone who is sane had Trump's number, and most were still afraid. I was pissed that Baldwin was being diminished by the equal weight the Republican fool was given in the discussion of the evening. I don't get mad in the same way anymore. By the way, Baldwin is not like, for those of you who've never read him or aren't familiar with him, it's not like it's just a Democratic screed. I mean, he's a great writer. He talks about essential things in the American character. So it was completely incongruous to listen to his work through the lens of this jerk, who's going through these real facile and stupid political talking points that she got off of Fox News and her friendly right-wing congressman. I was pissed that Baldwin was being diminished by the equal weight the Republican fool was given in the discussion of the evening. I don't get mad in the same way anymore. It was a very inartful response. The movie made me understand the utility of writing, the real service it provides. For years I had doubt. Why wasn't I doing something more practical or active, politics, or some kind of activism? I decided it just wasn't my nature. Yeats, I think, said that poets were the unacknowledged legislators of the world. When I saw the Baldwin movie, I got what Yeats meant. I was impressed by the power of writing in a new way after seeing that movie. It's a concrete thing. Ironically, the writer has little or no personal power, but his work makes the world go round. Intrigued by the line in your letter, the great writer line, I like that dialogue. If I get something close to what you're getting at, it's a pretty deep thing. Lots of levels. I hear you. When the writing process gets exciting for me, I feel like a stenographer. I often have the experience of really liking something that I wrote and feeling like someone else wrote it. Oh, I see. The great writer did it. And that's important because you have the experience of life and then you have the experience of writing. And there is this kind of inspiration that comes from somewhere else. Sometimes like that The Right People piece, when I put it up on Medium, they have some sort of algorithm that pops up a suggested hashtag. And it came up with the hashtag philosophy. I wasn't trying to be philosophical, but when I looked at it, there were stretches in that piece that sounded like something that a philosopher would have wrote. I have no idea where that came from. Okay, and I'm sure some neuroscientist could explain it. Like there's all these things that are pulled out of the unconscious. I think it's really important when you write to write about what you don't know, what you're trying to figure out. And you figure it out with a combination of rationality, so you think it through, you use critical thinking, but also with intuition and creativity. And you do them both in the same motion. And that leads to real writing, as I call it. The Hemingway section of your letter elicits another yes. We live, we write. Our lives influence our writing. Our writing influences our lives. The life and the writing are each as good as the extent of our courage. Courage is a great theme in your letter. Life and writing are the extent of the courage. I mean, how much are you going to live? How committed are you going to be to living? And how committed are you going to be to writing? A lot of times people will tell me, they'll say, I like your writing. Keep at it. Keep at it. But I'm committed to it. I mean, and there's a lot of sacrifice to be committed to it. It makes you an oddball. I mean, things are it creates practical challenges. It creates, but if you're committed, you work your way to. Well, you can't always get what you want, but you get what you need. Commitment. That's a big part of the process of writing. Now I've been doing it with 9 years for 9 years in what I consider to be a serious way. I've been I've always written, I've always created my whole life. The last 9 years, I did it with a more serious tack. I think the same thing is true about my teaching. Those two things, and with that, with it's absolutely essential to like say, okay, this is it. This is where I'm going to stand my ground. It's hard for people who have a lot of different talents and could probably do several things well. So and for me, it was a long time. There's a big process before you even start to do your real writing of discovering what it is that you are. But for about 9 years, I've known that I'm a writer and a teacher, and I and I'm happy with the results. I'm happy with the. It's not really a choice. I was going to say I'm happy with the choice. It's not a choice. It's not a matter of choosing. It's a matter of discovering. I mean, I believe that we are born to be a certain way, to do certain things, to have a certain relation to life, and that has to be made conscious, and in order to commit to it. All right, back to the email here. I saw a documentary yesterday about the writer Graham Greene. He's not a big influence. I read some of his books long ago. I was just curious. The title of the film, if you haven't seen it, is Graham Greene: A Dangerous Edge. We have to be on that edge, I guess, but we can't manufacture it. Greene, Whitman, Hemingway, and the bullfighters, Baldwin, you, me. It's simply who and what we are. I think this points back to something you said in a previous communication about not everybody being an artist. There is a destiny about all of this. We can't help it. We can run from it, which I've done a couple times in my life, and the avoidance unleashes furies. We experience anti joy. Our greatest gift turns into pain. But even the time off track is on track in a strange way, and grist for the mill of creation. I am sheepish to ask, new paragraph here. I am sheepish to ask, but courage sometimes blushes. I ask your permission to publish this email exchange as I did before. Our friendship is a triangle. The third point is our greater worlds. I'd like to let them see the sausage being made. Maybe not always, but this discussion has universal applications, not exclusively personal to us. No exhibitionism, no violations of our personal containment, no violations of privacy, a part of what we share with the world. Of course, if you have any reservations, they will be respected, and that will be that. These letters are friendship acts and of personal value to us. But they also resemble my dinner with Andre in form, except this is an exchange between equals. Equality is so important in art and education. I remember that old, if I remember that old movie right, Wallace Shawn had a lower status, at least initially, than Andre Gregory, and that brought the drama. Shawn changed in that regard, or maybe I got that wrong. And what I'm saying here is that that's not the relationship between me and Rob, and it's not the relationship between me and you, and it's not my relationship between me and the world. We're equals, right? We're equals. I I was born with a rebellion against the idea of the expert, the guru, the authority, the one who knows. Art and education happen between people, between the artist and the audience, between the teacher and the student. That should be the relationship with leadership in business and politics and sports. I don't know, whatever. That's really the dynamic. We really the reality is truly all men and women, of course, are created equal. So that's my take on it. This sitting at the other person's feet. By the way, it never ends well. Thomas Hart Benton was Jackson Pollock's teacher, and of course, Jackson Pollock ended up doing completely different work than Thomas Hart Benton. From these realistic, I think unfairly criticized as cartoonish paintings that Thomas Hart Benton did, and that he'd do murals for department stores and things like that, and that improvisational abstract painting that Jackson Pollock is so famous for. But it's really interesting to me that Thomas Hart Benton had the attitude that when his student left, and I think a lot of teachers have this problem. When his student left, he said, "Well, I really don't like what you're doing, but I respect it." I mean, if there's the idea that that phrase like-minded people, maybe it should be like-hearted people, because it's happened to me a million times. Well, that's an exaggeration, obviously, but it's happened to me a lot. The friendship's over, the association's over because you're going in different directions or you don't think the same way. So, my question is, if that's the truth, then it was never a friendship or an association at all, because it seems narcissistic to me. So you only exist in my life to affirm my commitments. We can't appreciate each other for who the other person is. In that right people piece, the preceding segment to this one, I talked about the relationship between Hugh Hefner and Gahan Wilson, where Hefner knew when he hired Wilson that he liked Wilson's work, and he knew it was going to go in other directions that Hefner couldn't predict. And he committed to that. Because Hefner, he hired Gahan Wilson near the beginning of Playboy magazine, and Hefner didn't know what directions Playboy was going to go into. And that's right-hearted people. By the way, it's my work to get to the truth from my perspective. And there is such a thing, I believe, as absolute truth. I also believe that it's a mystery, and I don't believe that it's available to us. And the love that we should show for each other is the love of respecting the other person's journey as well as our own. I mean, love is the meeting of two solitudes, but the solitude is always there. So whoever's listening to this or whoever's reading my segments, whoever's reading it, I mean, you know, you're you're on your journey and I'm on my journey, and ultimately we're both human beings. So they are at their core the same journey, but we can't require of each other to be in the same place, and unfortunately, we can't require on anybody else to make up our mind about anything. I mean, one thing as a person that writing has done, the process of writing for me is I believe it's made me. I've always been an independent person. I think it's made me a lot more confident and secure in my independence. I I know that no one else can do this for me. The, no one else can do it, and and that's true in my life too. No one else, one has to be the authority of their own life in order to live. Okay, back to the email. I read your letter here on a couple of levels. First and foremost, I love hearing from an old friend. Next, I appreciate the focus on writing. It's invaluable to talk with a generous and trusted peer about what we do. Then it struck me that a great frustration for me when I was a nightclub improviser, that's a million years ago, was the mediocrity of the audience suggestions. Your sensitive and insightful writing and the hospitality of your invitation of my response, we share that hospitality mutually, is a great suggestion. It triggers my creativity. And that's the part of this exchange with Rob on the email that made me want to do this piece. Because he just like opens up my creativity. This is a weird connection to make, but once I had a massage, and the masseuse touched exactly the right spot on my back. And I felt like a Technicolor movie was projected from that spot. I was in blissful relief, and I saw bright tigers and a luminous green rainforest. The release cleared obstructions and remembered and showed the future at the same time. That is similar to what I feel talking to you. I am certain that you are an extraordinary leader in the theater. I think you have a little silver hammer and gently tap people between the eyes, and they bloom. Among other things, you are a maestro of human potential. You have such diverse and related talents, Rob, and they are sourced in the breadth and depth of your personal character, authentic and natural. How great to be in touch, Rob. I look forward to our continuing conversation and in hearing all about your world and all about one of your projects, that show. Have a great day, Rob. Rick. On Wednesday, December 11th, 2019, at 1:04 p.m., Robert McCaskill wrote, "Great corresponding with you. I enjoy your flashlight, even when the glare is harsh. When it's gentle, it's like William Daniels lighting Dietrich. You can post our email with gratitude, with my gratitude. You can post our email with my gratitude." I misread one of your sentences. When you wrote that during a massage you saw bright tigers and a luminous green rainforest, I first read bright tigers in luminous green raincoats. Perhaps I'm holding on to a little protection, or maybe I'm still a fan of fashion. On Wednesday, December 11, 2019, 2:41 p.m., Richard Thomas wrote, "The gratitude is mutual, Rob. Thank you. Fashion is nice and protection is natural, I reckon. A public service announcement from your friendly bull in a china shop. I can be brusque and presumptuous and pay too little attention to the form of fashion. But I am an upright character, and you forgive me for it. You are better than me at reading the nuance of the other. I am solitary. I quietly listen to the world for hours on end and then roar my responses. I appreciate your patience and your cautious steps to total trust. You appreciate people and art on their and its own terms. I'm a challenging friend, eccentric and obsessed, but you love me for it. Your generosity has bequeathed you a huge world. It gives you access to the good stuff. Rage is part of my process, often the departure point, the match that lights the fire. I often get pissed off and write to understand. Other strong emotions get the ball rolling as well. Writing has helped me deal with anger in my life. The better I get at writing, the less I explode. I am much more gentle more of the time than I was when I knew you in my early 30s. But I still get mad. I think the right people will be a kind of cure. I have sometimes lived in too small a world. More is possible than I realized at those moments. I only recently have begun to consistently feel at home. In other periods, I wanted to believe that I was home, told myself that I was home. And then I got upset when I found that I wasn't. When I was younger, I sometimes felt let down and betrayed by the world. Later, I felt that I betrayed myself. Now I know that I am simply learning. And so is the world. Being too hard on myself and others was a limitation of my consciousness, a flaw in my swing. I was enraged on Thanksgiving this year, 2019. I can't remember why. I wrote a couple of subsequent segments after that frustrating pain. One was gentler, the Jack Lemmon segment. Again, all this stuff is on the blog. And one was harsh, the one about the ignorant and the great, I am great. The segment on ignorant great is, in my estimation, the least strong of my recent writing, but I still like it. I think the right people is a kind of rewrite. But the harshness, as you acknowledge, has its place. So I still work on how to use that color of my palette. I wrote a segment shortly before we reconnected, the definition of success. The first line was, I think Del Close was an asshole. Part of what the segment did was tear Close, IO Theater, and the Second City Training Center new assholes. I really liked that piece. It wasn't bitter. It was liberating. It wasn't expressed frustration. It was release from frustration. It was about a lot more than local theatrical politics. It hit universals. My anger is part of my power when it is processed through the alchemy of writing. My sweetness is too. I don't do precisely what Daniels did. That's Dietrich's cinematographer. I don't do precisely what Daniels did if I understand what he did. He turned Dietrich into an ideal. And let me say that I asked Rob, is that fair in your view? And actually, when I was for the written version of this piece, which usually I just read these things, this video is significantly different, expanded from the written version. But for the written version of that piece, I go to Google images. So I look William Daniels, Marlene Dietrich, and I looked at some of those pictures, and I used one to accompany the written version of this piece. And when I saw it, that's when I understood what Rob meant. Okay, that is art. So I'm going to continue reading this, but he was saying something more profound than I understood at the time. But this is so I say, if I understand what Daniels did, he turned Dietrich into an ideal. Well, in subsequent email, because there's like personal emails, we've corresponded even since this correspondence, but Rob acknowledged he knew what I was saying here, that I don't idealize things. I'm not sentimental. But Daniels was not sentimental either. That was art. He didn't idealize Dietrich. He really saw her beauty. And that's why Rob was comparing My Gentle Flashlight to William Daniels. Because when I admire something, I'm all in. I jump in with both feet. I mean, I said it in another piece. I said it in another exchange with Rob too. You know, I get that from my father. You know, uh, um, actually, you know, when you think of the glare of the flashlight, the harsh glare of the flashlight, and the gentle light, really, I don't know. I think that might be writing. You know, I mean, it's all part of that process of liberation from what's false, what's destructive, and embrace of what's true and creative. So in a way, I think it's a there's two uh, uh, well, maybe gradations between them as well, but there's two levels. There's two shifts that you can hit on your flashlight. So Rob was responding to the part which, frankly, I wasn't even that conscious of. That there's a lot of admiration in my writing because there's a lot of beauty in the world that I see. So if I celebrate Mrs. Maisel. I celebrate it because I'm doing a lot of other things in the piece. I'm not writing a TV series review, but it's a wonderful show, and I express my admiration for the achievement of the show. So just like I express my admiration for Rob, he's a wonderful person. So I express that. That's the William Daniels part. And then if I turn around and I say, well, I think Dalclose was an asshole. Well, you got this guy who's doing really pretty basic introductory creative training, and who's like hitting, he's pushing 60 and he's hitting on 25, 30-year-old women and trying to get him back to his apartment to give him heroin. Starfucker, fame pimp, that's been destructive to the art of improvisation. That is the glare of the spotlight. Okay, and Rob, of course, accepted both of them and offered that he accepted both of them. But then he said that he wanted to be protected a little bit, which really educated me because I realized it's like the way that I am, because that flashlight has that glare. A lot of times that scares the shit out of people. It scares the shit out of good people. It can make people very defensive. They feel that they're criticized. This isn't about Rob. I mean, he's just making this point. But I mean, I see this in the. But when he made that point, it made me realize that that's part of the process of writing too, and it's actually, that has been a very isolating and alienating thing in my life. Something that I never understood until I processed these comments from Rob, because here's how it plays in my head and in my heart, and also I think the truth of the matter. Judgment's a really important part of writing. You got to make judgments. I think it was Woody Allen who said, people say don't make value judgments. He said you should always be making value judgments. That's a big part of what writing's about it, it's about discernment. If discernment was easy for me, I wouldn't be a writer. I mean, I have to engage in a in this process in order to figure it out. But interestingly, ironically, paradoxically, not ironically, paradoxically, in my personal relationships, I'm really not judgmental much at all. I mean, I'm very accepting of wherever the other person is. I mean, I'm a pretty nice guy. The only people that I ice, and actually, there's been a lot of them, but that's another story. That's part of what the right people is about, and that's what that ignorant great piece said with some rage. People that I ice out of my relationships are mean people, toxic people who are destructive to what I'm committed to doing, people who will interfere with the enterprise of my life and my writing. Those are the people that I leave. I won't judge a person because I once made this mistake. It's a small mistake. It doesn't matter now. I'm very, very much in love with my wife. Don't think about any other. I love my wife. This is going back like when I wasn't a kid, but I was very immature sexually. And there was this girl that I really liked, but I didn't pursue her because one day I sat with her on the couch at her apartment and she was wearing a pair of jeans that had a Mickey Mouse decal sewn into the jeans. And that was the basis of my decision. It's about the only time in my life that's not important to me now. I mean, it was, you know, it was the only time in my life I think that I made that kind of judgmental decision, that kind of snobbish, stupid uh, approach to another person. I think one of the most wonderful, in my mind, I think it might be his best movie ever. You want to see a good movie about this type thing? It's Woody Allen's Sweet and Lowdown, where he goes after glamour pusses. The guy's a great musician, and he goes after sophisticates, and he has this. It's really a wonderful performance by both Sean Penn and Samantha Morton. If you haven't seen this movie, you should see it. It's really good. And he rejects this simple woman, simple in the best sense of that word, who would do anything for him, you know, who just loved him totally, and he loved her, and that's about that movie is about that stupid type of judgment. Okay, back to the email. Your comment about gentle light reminds me of that Thomas Mann quote. It was something like, a writer kills his subjects with arrows dipped in love. I'm working through your comment here. You're right. A samurai never fights in anger. Arrows dipped with love. That's a great quote. I can only get to that sweet spot through experience, my living and writing. Alan Alda said something like, don't let go of things, go through them. Actually, I think I said that. Alda said something like it, but I like mine better. Don't let go of things, go through them. You have to process it. It has to be a transformation. You can't change who you are uh, through a triumph of the will. You can't will yourself to be at a certain stage in your development. You have to actually go through the stage of development to get you there. Can anger at times be an expression of love? I think so. I mean, I see it right now. The impeachment hearings in the House Judiciary Committee are on TV right now. I'm recording this. It's in the background with the sound down. I mean, so can anger at times be an expression of love? I think so. I think the zeitgeist of the present moment calls for it. I mean, these people are ruining our lives. The Anyway, our democracy, our environment, our education system, our healthcare system, our wages, I mean, they're trashing everything. And their answer is a kind of resentment because they say, well, you don't respect us because we're in flyover country, we're in Tennessee and Ohio and Texas, and you look down on us, and we won the election in 2016, which they didn't, but they didn't get the most votes, and the votes that they did get were fixed. But so they're just pursuing power, and we can understand them when we can hug them later. But eventually, we have to say, cut it the fuck out. This has got to stop. Stop it. You're fucking everything up for us. Get the fuck out of our. You're going to have to stop, and then later we can come to some sort of understanding. But they're in the zeitgeist. Sometimes you just have to stand up and you have to be pissed. This is a time to be pissed, I believe. But back to the text here of the email. But I also think that the best way to pass an ogre is to go around him. And that contradicts my Alda comment. And it contradicts what I just said about being pissed about these people, except this is an ogre that we can't get around. Because we have to deal with it, because they want to significantly change our country, and we like it. Okay. And now this line to Rob, which is like, and you notice this thing, it's an email exchange. You say, well, Rob has a few lines and you're going on and on and on. And it's like, yeah, but here's the point of it. You got me thinking and wondering, you bastard. So this is the, when someone responds to you with gives a loving response, and it's for them. It's not like a selfless act, and it's for the relationship itself. I would do a lot of writing about my marriage, but my wife is a very private person and she just doesn't want me to. I mean, that's a big part of my life. That's a big part of my experience. But I appreciate that Rob, as a friend, said, like I said earlier, showing the sausage being made. I mean, this is very, obviously it's very important. Okay, back to the email. To the extent my anger comes from a sense of inequality, it's a vestigial tale. We are shaped and we shape the world. We aren't life's victims. I've made progress, a lot of progress in this regard, but I have further to go. Tigers in green raincoats, get it right, goddammit. Kidding. And that's the whole thing. Take care, pal, Rick. And that whole joke at the end about getting it right, that when Rob talks about seeing tigers and green, my line about tigers and rainforests, and he saw tigers and raincoats. That and I'm joking to him about getting it right. These aren't even if I look a little bit like Zeus this morning. These aren't pearls falling from Mount Olympus, but it speaks to what a bold and delicate thing real connection between two people is. P.S. And this P.S. is the end of the piece. Greatness isn't complete until it learns to bear with imperfect people, including oneself. I'll never connect with the right people until I learn how to do that with little effort. Preoccupation with past and present offenses are distractions. When one has truly left the wrong people, then one can write about them with detachment and love. And I think so that glare of and as I'm saying this, I'm making a distinction. That glare of the flashlight, that glare of the flashlight becomes counterproductive if it's a glare based in resentment. So if it's really processed, then outrage, righteous indignation. That's a great word. Righteous. It's righteous to be indignant. Righteous indignation is okay. This kind of victimized. You did this to me. Resentment. That's the bitterness, which I'm happy to say I think quite largely my writing doesn't have. From that perspective, now I would change what I wrote here. From that perspective, harshness is a shadow on my writing and bullfighting. I don't think that harshness is a shadow on my writing because I don't think it's really resentful. I think that living as a writer, there has to be a sensitivity and an understanding of the effects that my very cast of mind can have on other people. Not that they're afraid that they're going to be told that they're wrong, but they're afraid that they're going to invest in having relation with me, to being connected with me, and then they're going to end up feeling hurt because I'm going to take off because they have Mickey Mouse sewn on their jeans, and I'm not going to take off. Deliver us from evil. I'm getting there. The last line: the hardness and soft luster of jade. Okay. Okay. Copyright 2019. Richard Thomas.